Hello everyone, and welcome to day 3 of our latest blog series leading up to Easter, based on Tom Wright's online material about the Servant King. Our link to scripture today is the beautiful Isaiah chapter 40, today particularly looking at verses 12 to 31. As Matt said in his blog yesterday, the start of chapter 40 sees a tone, in a sense, set by God of comfort and blessing. God's glory is revealed in forgiving Israel's past shortcomings and foretelling better times ahead with the coming of the expected Messiah. Isaiah was one of the many prophets who gave indeed many warnings and instructions to the people. But whilst chapter 40 emphasises the scale and magnitude of God, it was also God's will that people receive his comfort. He wants those who pass his message on to speak comfort to the people waiting on his word. For all of us, in a sense, to comfort one another and love as he loves us. It was, and indeed still is, vital for those hurting and in pain physically but also emotionally and spiritually to hear and know God's comfort. God speaks directly into our hearts. He is our shepherd, gently guiding us home. And if we go astray, he is the loving Father welcoming us back into the fold if we all go a bit prodigal on him. Isaiah emphasises God's authority over all of his creation. Verse 12 of chapter 40 begins, "Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains and the hills?" God is so great and dominant over all creation, Isaiah reflects in a poetic manner, but this is not in a physical sense, it's a spiritual one. God has sent us his Spirit to influence all of his creation, how we act towards others, and how we treat his world. God is not about physical size, it's spiritual presence. Like me, you may recall childish squabbles in the playground at primary school that often ended with a sort of veiled threat. "My dad's bigger than your dad." Well, God is bigger than all of this in his glory and in his spirit. He already knows how heavy the mountains are. He created them. He knows how much dust covers the earth. God indeed has infinite wisdom to use the knowledge he has. He needs no counsel, no instruction, no teacher to show him the ways of comfort and compassion. In verse 17 we see, "Before him all nations are as nothing." And in verse 23, "He brings princes to naught and reduces rulers of this world to nothing." God has no time for egos or power trips. That's why he sent Jesus to earth to rule as a servant king, based on love and grace, not ruthless dominion. God declares his greatness over his own creation and wants our arrogance to cease, to be consigned to the past in a spiritual change of heart. God also dispels in Isaiah the notion of worshipping false gods, idols, that don't compare to the loving God because they are made by men's hands and are worthless. God has no rivals or peers. He commands us to worship him, to take up our cross and follow. From verse 21, Isaiah becomes almost incredulous about those who would doubt God's greatness. "Have you not known? Have you not heard? Look what God has created. It's all around you." Many of us, including myself, I'm sure, will enjoy walking in God's creation, to just be still at times, to appreciate and take in the natural beauty that we often miss or just take for granted. Isaiah too, in these verses, was also ahead of his time in a sense. Not only did he prophesy the coming Messiah, he also stated that the earth was round. It's not clear how quite he would have known this, but in verse 22 he says, "God sits enthroned above the circle of the earth." Years before that, he's ahead of his time. He's years before Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, even Brian Cox. So throughout Isaiah 40, we see the greatness and glory of God, and he shows how understanding this helps our lives. God is interested in all the minutiae of our daily lives, in the mundane, the ordinary, not just the wondrous. Indeed, from him, no secrets are hidden. The beautiful verses of Isaiah 40 end with God's power working in people's lives. He gives strength to the weak and turns the notion of power upside down, that the first really shall be last and the last first. We see this reversal of power in both Old and New Testament, foretold in one and made real by Jesus in the other. We see it through the Beatitudes, the parables, the Lord's Prayer, and we see it, of course, in Jesus' entire life, death and resurrection. Isaiah 40 ends with a promise that in God's strength we will soar on wings of eagles. But that strength is not based on arrogance or physical power, but it's missional, and we should promote outreach and fellowship in God's name to spread his teaching. Part of his work is to care for others, and that involves coming alongside people, putting an arm around them, when of course we're allowed, listening to their story. This is what Isaiah learned from God in these wonderful verses. It's what Jesus himself taught. and is the ethos also of Comic Relief, Red Nose Day today. Care and love. Finally then, as it is Red Nose Day today, I'd like to end with 2 dad jokes that rather appeal to me. Sadly today I got hit in the head with a can of Diet Coke. Don't worry, I'm not hurt, it's only a soft drink. My friend wants to become an archaeologist, but I'm trying to put him off. I'm convinced his life will be in ruins. Have a good day everyone, in spite of that. Smile and laugh well. Bye for now.